Chapter 19, 02 Flower Girl. The commander was quite nice to Zhang Yi. After all, the dark chocolate beauty he sent to him was considered a very high standard in the local area. Naturally, Zhang Yi had no reason to refuse. Instead, he rubbed his hands with a look of surprise. Thank you, Commander. Long live the commander. In the shadow space, Zhou Qier and several other women have started to feel unhappy. That kind of woman is terrible in both appearance and figure. Her waist is not thin enough, and her face is not as pretty as mine. Using this kind of woman to seduce Zhang Yi? How ridiculous. If this wasn't an act, I think my brother would have vomited on the spot. Just as several women were complaining crazily, an inappropriate voice was heard nearby. But the boss seems to have never come into contact with this kind of black beauty. The boss is very curious. He always wants to experience things he has never experienced. The person who spoke was a fat man with a simple and honest look. As soon as these words were spoken, several murderous and sharp glances shot over. Fatty Sue's face turned pale, and he quickly raised his hands and said, "However, how could a hero like the boss be delayed by women? He will definitely remember his mission." No matter what, Zhang Yi still had to act excited at this time. The Black Beauty also walked up to Zhang Yi and hugged his neck affectionately. Zhang Yi knew in his heart that this woman was sent by the other party to monitor him. "Commander, thank you very much." Zhang Yi put on a show and thanked Commander Shan for the reward with a smile. The commander waved at him. "Well, you go down first." Cui Zhe personally escorted Zhang Yi out, and after arriving outside the door, he warned him. When working for the commander, the most important thing is the word loyalty. As long as you work loyally for the commander, you will be rich and powerful. But his tone turned cold, and his eyes became like a knife, as if he was going to stab Zhang Yi in the chest. If you dare to do anything to let down the commander, the end that awaits you will be more cruel than hell. Zhang Yi's face changed, and he hurriedly said, I know, I will do my job well." Cui Zhe nodded, and then arranged a car to take Zhang Yi and the dark chocolate to the house assigned to him. After arriving at the place, Zhang Yi took off his disguise. Luke Heron took over the entire network of KG Kingdom, and the whole process took less than a minute. It's almost as difficult as a world-class hacker breaking into a small internet cafe. There are surveillance cameras installed in the room, even in the bedroom and bathroom. Cui Zhe can control his every move. However, Luke Heron was able to create a realistic video and deceive Cui Zhe. So as soon as the door was closed, the Black Beauty took off her heavy clothes and tried to come closer with a smile, when an arrow shot directly into her forehead, causing her to faint on the spot. Yang Xinxin walked out from the shadow on the ground. "I implanted a false memory in her because of the arrow just now. After waking up, she will only think that she had interacted with you." Zhang Yi sat on the sofa, and others also appeared from the shadows one after another. Mind Field can spy on the movements within a 5-kilometer radius around, and no movement can escape his eyes. After Xian Haixio came out of the shadow space, he looked at the familiar room and couldn't help but burst into tears. "This is the house where Cheng Mei and I lived." Zhang Yi's eyes moved slightly when he heard this. "Did you deliberately arrange me in this place? Interesting. Okay, next we will start the action. There are 2 objectives of the mission." Zhang Yi raised 2 fingers. First, obtain the Spear of Longinus. Second, he looked at Xian Haixio, met the other's hopeful eyes, and said, "Rescue Li Qingmei." Xian Haixio's eyes showed gratitude. But the problem is, the Spear of Longinus is just a name, but no one has ever seen what it is. I only know from the records in the Dead Sea Scrolls that it is a sealed object known as the Spear of God-Killing. Since the name is a gun, the appearance can be understood as something in the shape of a gun. It has always been on the North African savanna. There is a special connection between the sealed object and the sealed object. This should be the guidance given to us by the existence of the previous seal of the Druk giant god. If I'm not mistaken, it was because Commander Shan obtained it that he became the ruler of the Cage Kingdom. And he would never put such an important thing too far away from him. So, I think the Spear of Longinus should be on the island where he lives. Fatty Sue raised his hand and questioned. Since it's a gun, is it possible that it's on him? Xian Haixio shook his head. It can't be on him.
Why?
Asked Fatty Sue. Xian Haixio said, because I once took a bath with him. I saw him naked, and he didn't carry any gun other than his own. And the gun he had, it can hardly be called a gun considering its size. It can be called a syringe at most. Fatty Sue raised his eyebrows. Oh? So, you are very brave. That's not what I meant. Of course, I didn't deny it. It's just that I took a bath with him at that time, and he didn't carry such a thing. Zhang Yi said lightly. Don't guess. The gun that seals Mammon is not the kind we humans understand. Judging from the size of the Drucker giant, his height is at least 50 meters. What is a gun to him is a giant tower to humans. I think there should be a place like an underground palace under the island where he lives. Yang Xinxin suddenly said. According to the clue in Tuebei 2, there is a golden sword hidden in the east gate, and the warrior enters the imperial palace through the back door. The imperial palace may be the homonym of the underground palace. And in the whole country of Keiji, the only place that can be called the imperial palace is that small island. The Spear of Longinus is very likely buried underground. Zhang Yi crossed his arms and frowned and said, but even if we can guess it, we can't rashly go underground to explore. First of all, we don't know all the information about Kenshan, let alone the military strength of Keiji. It's better to be careful when doing things in someone else's territory. Olive provided Zhang Yi with information about Kenshan's abilities. Kenshan, a user of fire attribute ability, calls himself the sun god Amonare, and his ability is Eternal Sun. But the question is, why was he able to gather such a powerful force of faith in just 3 years? Zhang Yi was most puzzled by this. Faith cannot be false. False faith has no meaning. It must come from the bottom of your heart, and you must truly believe in a certain religion or god to gather the power of your mind. Not to mention Zhang Yi in Huaxi country, at least in Jiangnan region and Tianhai City, he has countless fans. The people of Tianhai City revere him like a god. But Zhang Yi had never felt such power appearing in himself. Zhang Yi looked at Xian Haixio. Tell us how he did it. Xian Haixio was silent for a moment, then slowly said, Stockholm Syndrome. Stockholm Syndrome refers to the symptom that a kidnapped person will fall in love with the kidnapper in special circumstances. Usually, the kidnapped people develop a fear of death and despair due to the kidnapper's death threat. At this time, the kidnappers suddenly showed their human side and performed some friendly actions towards the kidnapped person. So, at this time, the kidnapped person in desperate situation will be so grateful that he will fall in love with the kidnapper. Xian Haixio said, as you know, Africa's culture and technology are very backward. Even in the middle of the 21st century, 90% of the people in the country have not received education above junior high school. At the beginning of the apocalypse, although it was not as extremely cold as in the north, the drastic change in the environment also caused a large number of people to freeze to death. One day, Kenshan appeared from nowhere. With his absolutely powerful military force, he became the most powerful warlord in Keiji and conquered the entire country. Since he took office, people's lives have been worse than before. Because when the apocalypse comes, people can still rely on their own abilities to get food. The climate in North Africa is hot, but the resources are rich. In places near the sea, you can catch a lot of seafood with just a small boat. And there is no problem of frozen soil and planting. Logically speaking, after adapting to the extreme cold, this is the most suitable soil for human survival in the world. But Commander Kenshan adopted a totalitarian rule and controlled all the resources of Keiji. He and a small number of Keiji's senior officials can enjoy delicious food and live a good life. But in many places outside of Presang, it is a luxury for ordinary people to even have a bite of meat soup. When people are forced into a desperate situation, he will distribute some food and daily necessities. So at this time, he becomes the sun in people's hearts, the fire of hope, and the eternal light. The propaganda agencies have also been promoting throughout the country, calling Commander Sean the reincarnation of the sun god, an incarnation born into the world to save the cage people in the Ice Age. Only those who believe in the commander, worship the commander, and dedicate everything to the commander can be saved. In the future they can get food, wealth, warm homes, and the most beautiful women. You know, most of the lower-class people can't resist such temptation. After the commander forces them into a desperate situation, as long as he gives them a glimmer of hope, it is enough to make them obedient. Hearing this, Zhang Yi sneered. I thought it was such a brilliant trick, but isn't this just a cult? They claim that they are the incarnation of God, or the Son of God, and make empty promises to believers with their own dogma. Promises of life after death or afterlife are often made because these things cannot be falsified. Then, if anyone raises doubts, they are subdued by violence. The rest of the people did not dare to speak out against it, so the cult leader's teachings gradually became the truth. Xian Haixio sighed. Who says it's not true? We are from Huashu country, so we can see through his clumsy tricks. These are all left over from those pyramid schemers back then, and we don't believe them at all. But the locals believe them. In addition, later, European countries wanted to migrate to the warm Africa, and wars broke out in the process. The commander led the army to win several victories, which made the people more convinced that he was the savior. Xian Haixio spread his hands and said to Zhang Yi, in this way, he made the people of Cage country jump on the brink of dire straits, constantly make them despair, and then give them hope. So in hell, Commander Sean became the only ray of light in their lives. Do you think their beliefs can be pious? Even some people who didn't believe at all at the beginning were forced into mental confusion and unwilling to consider the problem with rational thinking. They simply gave themselves to such beliefs. Zhang Yi sighed after listening. It turns out that I was too nice to those people in Tianhai City. No wonder they didn't believe in me sincerely. Yang Xinxin smiled and said, Brother, there is nothing to envy. People with free will be more active. No matter how many lambs there are, they can only provide fresh meat for the jackals, but cannot follow the jackals to fight. Don't forget, 10,000 people survive, but one person cannot escape. Why be that one person? Zhang Yi's mind became much clearer. He nodded. That's true. Some things require talent. I really can't be as cruel as him, but if that's the case, it will be hard to let go of the hatred in your heart, right? Lu Karen suddenly spoke up, frowning, indicating that she couldn't understand. Even if they choose to worship Commander Shaun because they cannot change the status quo, they should know in their hearts who caused them to live the life they have today. Commander Shaun lives a life of luxury, but they can't even get enough food. Won't their faith be shaken? Xian Haixio sneered. Of course it's because they don't know. Our Commander Shaun's external propaganda is to save food for the country of Cage. They only eat 1 grain of rice a day. Yang Xinxin's face was very calm. As a person who has read history books, she is very familiar with this situation. Is that so? Then maybe there is a way to undermine his power of faith. Zhang Yi rubbed the back of his hands. Now, the most important thing is to find where the spear of Longinus is stored. Xian Haixio, do you have any connections in the country of Keiji? Xian Haixio shook his head helplessly. I'm just a chef. Although I have come into contact with Ken Shan, I have no access to high-level secrets at all. Yang Xinxin thought for a while, then said to Zhang Yi, for Ken Shan, the spear of Longinus is the foundation of his power. He will not tell anyone about its existence. So, if we want to find it, we have to rely on ourselves. Lu Karen also said, there is no information about the spear of Longinus in the information network of Keiji country. She shrugged. The network of this country is too backward. It is basically in the city of Prison, and the network in other areas is close to zero. Zhang Yi supported his chin with both hands, his eyes heavy, and said, we must find the spear of Longinus as soon as possible and then leave. Otherwise, I will be exposed after a long time. Zhang Yi is very self-aware. He is not a professional agent. If you stay with Ken Shan for too long, it is almost a high probability that he or the elite military officers around him will find out your flaws. Everything leaves traces behind. If you want to know the location of the Spear of Longinus, you need to know where Commander Shan started and when he began to rise. Based on these 2 points, we can basically determine where he got the Spear of Longinus from. Yang Xinxin gave Lu Karen a look, and Lu Karen quickly gave an answer. Ken Shan's hometown is in the suburbs of Moro City, more than 130 kilometers away from Presun City. She searched through this information and quickly found a lot of relevant information. He was originally a local military policeman in Moro City and worked in the post office. He really began to come to prominence in May 2051, about half a year after the end of the world. Zhang Yi said, "In that case, we must go and investigate." Xian Haixio hurriedly said to Zhang Yi, "But if you leave suddenly, what if his people come looking for you?" Zhang Yi looked at Xian Haixio and smiled. "Don't worry, it only takes me a minute to go back and forth." He patted Xian Haixio's shoulder. "But what you said makes sense. I haven't completely won their trust yet. They will continue to observe me, and I won't take any action for the time being. Let's take advantage of this time to investigate the city of Presang first." Zhang Yi and his team raced against time and decided to go out and take action that night. At the beginning, we cannot investigate from the commander-in-chief's residence, but we must investigate from the surrounding areas to find out the basic situation of the city of Presang. Even though Xian Haixio is here as a cook, he doesn't know everything. After all, it is inconvenient to travel on weekdays, so he has hardly left the vicinity of his home and workplace in the past 3 years. For safety reasons, Zhang Yi kept Uncle Yu. He asked Zhou Kuer to change his appearance into Wu Yanzu, while Zhang Yi changed his appearance to look like a normal middle-class Piliseng. After opening the dimensional door, Zhang Yi disappeared into the night sky in an instant. Late night in Piliseng City. The capital of KG Kingdom is not bright. The city is divided into 3 urban areas: the inner city, the middle city, and the outer city. There is a clear dividing line between the 2 areas. If you look down from space, you can see that the light and shadow are clearly layered like stairs. Xian Haixio explained to Zhang Yi, "Those living in the inner city are Commander Shan and his family, as well as the elders who followed him in the beginning. These people enjoy the most comfortable life and can enjoy a variety of nutritious food on a daily basis. Those living in the middle city are second-rate officials and senior technicians. The living standard is a little worse than that in the inner city, but they don't have to worry about keeping warm. They can even enjoy some entertainment activities. And those living in the outer city are ordinary people of Presang. They receive food according to a fixed quota every month, but they also go hungry one day and full the next. People who live here will hardly have the opportunity to cross classes in their lifetime and can only earn a living for their families in worse factories." Zhang Yi thought about it and decided to come to the outer city area first. Start understanding from this place first. It is not easy to be exposed. The entire outer city was completely without power at night. But when he flew through the air, he saw many shadowy figures swaying in the area where the outer city and the inner city met. You know, it's already past 2 in the morning. Even in Africa, the temperature outside has reached minus 16 degrees Celsius at this moment. Who would be outside in the cold wind at a time like this? Zhang Yi usually wears combat uniform and doesn't feel the cold. At this time, he was only wearing black close-fitting soft armor for camouflage, and he could still feel the low temperature of the outside world on his face and hands. The midnight wind blew on my face and the back of my hands, and it felt like someone was cutting my skin with a knife. It hurt so much. The sky and the earth were dark, so Zhang Yi landed on the ground naturally. He walked towards the area where the inner city and the outer city met. It just so happens that there is a very wide river here. When you walk onto the bridge, you can see people whispering to each other. Suddenly, a clear voice sounded in front of Zhang Yi. "Sir, would you like to buy some flowers?" Zhang Yi lowered his head and saw a figure wrapped in a worn cotton coat. It was freezing cold, but she was wearing thin clothes, and her face was red and cracked from the cold. This is the face of a mixed-race child, who looks only 13 or 14 years old. Flowers? Zhang Yi was stunned. In such cold weather, there are still people selling flowers? The girl continued, "You can buy safflower here for just 5 kilograms of rice. If you don't like safflower, there are sisters selling blue and yellow flowers." Zhang Yi vaguely realized that something was wrong, but he didn't dare to think about it as he looked at the girl in front of him who was only about 10 years old and not even as tall as his chest. Xian Haixio's voice rang in Zhang Yi's ears. "Sir, this is a flower girl. You'd better leave here as soon as possible. I've only heard of her before, but I didn't expect to see her for the first time because of you." Zhang Yi asked in a low voice. "What's going on?" Xian Haixio explained. "Even in the outer city of Pilaseng, there are many people who can't get enough food. At this time, many women with poor working ability have to sell their bodies in order to get enough food." Selling flowers is a code word. Red flowers refer to those between the ages of teens and 20. Unmarried women in their 20s are called blue flowers, and married women are called yellow flowers. As for widows who have lost their husbands, they are called purple flowers. I've always heard from others that there are many such women around Pilaseng. They rely on this to support themselves, and even their families. At night, when the power is cut off in the outer city, they will appear on the edge of the outer city. Zhang Yi listened silently, feeling a little emotional in his heart, but not expressing it too much. He has seen too much misery in this world, and he has important things to do right now, so he can't delay for this. The girl in front of me looks too young. Why would she become a flower girl unless she really couldn't survive? Seeing that Zhang Yi didn't say anything, the girl's excited voice trembled in the cold wind. "Sir, I'm very cheap. If you really can't make it, I can give you a discount. I haven't eaten for 2 days, and I'm almost starving to death. Please be kind." Her voice was full of tears. Zhang Yi raised his head and looked around. The river bank was filled with shadowy figures and women selling flowers. Not far from the river bank are rows of houses. Some have parents, husbands, and even children at home. They bring their guests and need to return home, separated from their families by a wall, and rely on selling their bodies in exchange for food. This is just a corner of the city of Pilaseng, and this place is also the capital of the Kingdom of Cage. The power of faith has been explained to us by the master of the underworld before. As long as the most devout believers make a wish in their hearts and concentrate a large amount of weak power on one person, it will produce a powerful effect. So, killing one person is equivalent to killing the power of 10,000 people. A hint of thought flashed in her eyes. Perhaps this represents the status quo of the future. In wars between races, the winners are determined by the top mutants who concentrate all the resources of the race. If the top mutants are defeated, the entire race will be destroyed. If 10,000 people survive, one person cannot escape. In fact, if one person dies, 10,000 people will not have a good ending. Dear viewers, thanks for staying with me. We'll try to get you more updates. Please like and subscribe and share the video with your friends. Love you all.